Hello, welcome into a new episode of Chi Time with me, Clara Apollo. We're here on Chi Time TV and UK Health Radio, and we're looking into the world of the energy that we all connect with and the consciousness that we have in the world, and particularly around how we do this together in unity, but also how we do it for ourselves. And I tell you what, I can't wait to introduce you to my guest. Have you heard of the World Tai Chi Qigong Day? Because I know it was something that I was looking into back when I was doing my Qigong training, and just thinking what a wonderful idea it is to bring together all these different schools and individuals that practice Tai Chi and Qigong. And what would happen, when that does happen? Well, today we have Bill Douglas is with us, and I'll just give you a little bit of introduction to him and the World Tai Chi Qigong Day that he's really well known for founding, about this idea of uniting the Tai Chi and Qigong enthusiasts and groups worldwide, but also government bodies and media and public and private health institutions. It's kind of captured the world's imagination for well over 20 years now, and it reaches millions of people. I mean, each year it's getting more and more. So this vision of a clearer, calmer, healthier planet that is possible by spreading Tai Chi and Qigong and other mind-body practices into society at all levels. And this has been recognized worldwide, and we're going to get into this because Bill has written a book, The Gospel of Science, that has got lots of facts to be able to back up what we're stating here. So Bill Douglas, or William Douglas, as indeed he is known also, is the founder and webmaster, content writer, video producer and media director for the World Tai Chi Qigong Day. He originally studied art and later sociology at the Kansas State University until he met his now wife, Angela Wong. And then he moved to California with her, where he discovered Tai Chi and Qigong, and that was nearly 30 years ago. I used to work as a retirement funds payroll and human resources administrator for several international corporations before a career in environmental and human rights. And then he got into Tai Chi and Qigong, and I bet his life changed there. I bet it did. Can't wait to talk to him. But then the idea of the World Tai Chi and Qigong Day struck him, and it's been he has been almost a full-time organizer of it ever since, doing his best to keep up with the growth of it, I bet, and the healing phenomenon, which is what we're going to get into, which has captured the world's imagination. So welcome to Chi Time, Bill. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great, and I've been so excited about being able to speak to you and Chi Time viewers. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, yeah, we're in the UK. We're near Glastonbury here, and in fact, we are recording this the evening before the Chinese New Year and the Imbolc and the new moon. So it feels like there's something bubbling for sure.
Yes, that does add a lot to this.
Yeah, so I'm just going to ask, how did this idea for the World Tai Chi Qigong Day, how did that strike you? Was it in a vision, or did it just drop in as an idea, or how did that happen?
Yeah, it was actually all of the above, and I've spent that was like over 2 decades ago, and so I've written a lot about it, and I tried to write about it again in this Gospel of Science. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is the new book that came out is new second edition Gospel of Science. So make sure you get new second edition Gospel of Science. The first book's filled with great science, but there is so much really profound science in this new second edition Gospel of Science. And on World Tai Chi Day, there were two things that happened, as I go back and try to, reform it in my mind. And the first thing that happened was that I started teaching in major medical institutions about 30 years ago. And they were for the public. They weren't for the staff or the doctors or anything. But in the very first one that I did at Shawnee Mission Medical Center, a whole bunch of doctors enrolled in it. They didn't know each other. One was a neurologist, one was a pharmacologist, one was a surgeon, one was an emergency room physician, and so on. And anyway, it just started blowing their minds. They were getting off of hypertension meds that they'd been on for years and years. They were reducing, diabetes related meds that they had been on. The surgeon lost a chronic pain condition that she'd had for many decades since a car accident. And she regained full mobility. She had limited mobility. So it was just blowing their minds. So what they did was they went to the hospital database, because that was kind of pre-Google, at least for me.
Yeah.
And they went to the hospital database, and they did a scan for Tai Chi and meditation medical research. And they found medical research that validated the benefits they had gotten in this 8-week course that they took when I started teaching there. And, and what I teach isn't different than what teachers are teaching all over the planet. I'm not trying to advertise my teaching here or anything, because what I do is I try to promote teachers all over the planet. I'm for global transformation.
Totally.
So, yeah. So anyway, then what happened was, well, both my parents died of heart disease. And, a lot of the research that these doctors were giving me were on hypertension and heart disease, which my parents both suffer from. And it dawned on me, actually, another thing that happened was when my mother passed away, she left a note I loaned her a copy of the Tao Te Ching to read in the hospital, in her hospital bed that night before her angioplasty. And then the next day, it was just a routine, angioplasty, but the next day she didn't survive. And the doctor came in and told us. And my sisters went to clean out her hospital room, and they found the Tao Te Ching I'd loaned her. And in it, she had written a note, and she said, I wished I could go back many years and try to learn the arts of relaxation that Junior was trying to teach me. That's what they called me, was Junior. And she said, I so would have loved to have seen my grandchildren grow up. And this just really sparked something in me. And so what I did, this was before World Tai Chi Day. What I did was I took all this medical research that I'd gotten from these doctors, and then Google came along. And so I was getting much more. And, things that could benefit like hundreds of millions of people just in our country, just in the United States. And I started sending this to media all over the world. This is before before the idea of World Tai Chi Day. And I was stunned, because the media was not the least bit interested. I mean, this could change the lives of, hundreds of millions of their viewers. And so I was meditating one day, and I guess this frustration was like boiling, somewhere in my brain. But I you go into meditation, you let it all go. I do Neigong, Chinese internal energy meditations. Sure. That's what I was trained in. And so I, went into this meditation. You're just trying to let your mind let go of everything so that you can become open, open to the Tao, the universe, whatever's there, and that we attune to, that we, kind of melt into when we go into those states, into the flow. And anyway, this idea dawned on me of creating a mass Tai Chi exhibition with like hundreds of people. And it would just be too visually spectacular, and do it in like a public place. Instantly, I knew it was the Nelson Atkins Art Museum in Kansas City. It's a spectacular location. And instantly I knew that's where it was going to be. But as I was envisioning this mass event, it was like in my mind, I could see that it was much more than just this one event. It was like I just knew that from the very beginning. And so we did it. Yeah, we spent like 6 months organizing. We were putting up leaflets at health food stores. The world was a lot different back then. You didn't have to do everything online. And so we were putting posters up in health food stores, just everywhere we could think of, and, doing public service announcements in media, whatever. And for 6 months we did this. And then the day came. It was like in April. And I had been saturating the media. I'd been bombarding the media with press releases, to cover this. And so we showed up that day at the Nelson Atkins Museum, and nobody was there. And I thought, oh my God, my first thought was, I hope the media doesn't show up. And then people just started walking in from all different directions. And pretty soon we had like 200 people out there. So I got them all spread out over the lawn so that they look like thousands of people, And the Nelson Atkins Museum was in the background behind them. And I had hired a photographer, and he took an iconic photo. We all had our hands up, doing a Qigong, that kind of cleansing downward. And that became an iconic photo. And it was in a newspaper in Russia at one point. The South China Morning Post in Hong Kong did a front page article on World Tai Chi Day a couple of years later, and they used that photo. And so, yeah, it all came together, and CNN picked up a feed from the local news station. And then we found out we'd been on CNN. And so it was right then when my Complete Idiot's Guide to Tai Chi and Qigong book was coming out, and in a new edition. And I decided to put in the back a list of all the Tai Chi and Qigong schools and organizations who supported World Tai Chi and Qigong Day and wanted to be listed in the book. And so my publisher let me put like this whole big chunk of Tai Chi and Qigong schools all around the world in the back of this book. And so that kind of lit the fuse for this idea of World Tai Chi and Qigong Day. And so now with this new book that just came out, what I'm doing with that is launching the Global Transformation Project. So this is a whole new vision, and it's just as clear and just as real as that World Tai Chi Day vision was. And, and a lot of people thought it was crazy 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us here on Chi Time. But it's following that which you knew was true. It was trying to birth through you. It's a new thing, but it felt so like needed. And because you were spurred on by the death of your mother, bless her, that must have given you that extra, I'm trying to do something here. She died unnecessarily in a way.
Right.
I mean, I know it's all our time when it's our time, but it's still that disorders that can be prevented, and this emphasis on preventative healthcare, and that Tai Chi and Qigong can give us. I mean, I don't practice Tai Chi now. I did back in the day, but I've become more into the the elemental Qigong, but then the Neigong also. It's where we're placing our mind and that heart, that harmony.
Qigong is my main focus, to be honest with you. I
Oh,
think
okay.
Qigong is like a real powerful heart. Tai Chi, yes, I do teach that, but the focus is Qigong.
It is, and this is the the healing art. That's what it is. That's what it means, really, isn't it? The cultivation of your chi. So, I'm that preventative healthcare piece, because I'm an ex-nurse, and one of the reasons I left nursing, I mean, my goodness, I have so much respect for nurses now, and it was a long time ago I did that, but I really felt that there was no emphasis on preventative healthcare, and that I just thought that was a great omission. It's like, I know we need to be inspired to do that, but the more of us that inspire each other to do that, and especially something like Tai Chi, and especially something like Qigong that is so glorious to let yourself feel and be part of the energy of, it kind of lures you in. So how do you feel about, what is true healthcare and where can we go with this? How can we encourage each other?
Yeah. Well, there's two tracks on that for me. I've spent the last 30 years, kind of beating my head against the wall with the healthcare system. And I realized, as this epiphany of this global transformation project formed, as I was finishing this second edition of the book, because the science just points to this as the solution. And we'll get into that more later. But, as I was doing that, I realized that there's so many roadblocks that are built up with the healthcare system. For example, in the United States, the National Institute of Health, which is where everybody gets their research funding, less than 0.5% of NIH funding goes to complementary and alternative medicines research. And that is shocking. I'll just give you one study out of UCLA. They were studying people with the regarding the shingles virus, and people getting their vaccinations. And they found some amazing things in this study. One is that they had a control group and they had a Tai Chi group. And again, for me, Tai Chi is Qigong, or it can be taught as Qigong. It depends on how the teacher approaches it. But it's fully capable of being Qigong. And so the Tai Chi group, they at the end of the study, it was, I can't remember how many weeks it was, maybe 13, I'm not sure. But all this is in the new second edition of the book, 718 pages of stuff like this, really huge science. And so anyway, at the end of this study, the Tai Chi group had 50% more helper T cells than the control group did. And that is huge, 50% more helper T cells, because helper T cells, front line of defense, they consume virus cells, and it's that natural immunity that we build inside. And that's a big deal. During the COVID crisis, one of the studies that they did found that they looked at the frontline healthcare workers that were exposed to, all the different variants, alpha, beta, delta, and now Omicron. And what they found was that the healthcare workers that caught COVID, the frontline healthcare workers that caught COVID, had lower helper T cell and helper T cell and CD4 cell counts. And the research shows that Tai Chi and Qigong boost T cell counts, helper T cell counts, CD4 cell counts. So this is a huge thing, just that one thing. You would
Mm.
think that would bring like a flood of money in to start studying mind-body practices, because meditation and yoga, from the research I've done, the big five, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, yoga, and mindfulness training, all these things boost your immune system. So you'd think there'd be a flood of money flowing towards it, but it's not happening. It's still, as far as I know, if somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's still less than 0.5%. So yoga, meditation, aromatherapy, massage therapy, acupuncture, we all have to fight over less than 0.5%. And if you read Tai Chi and Qigong studies, they're great studies, very helpful, but they all end with a line, if they're an NIH study, and that is, this needs to be studied in larger, quote unquote, more expensive, well, not quotes, but
Well,
brackets.
that's it. There needs to be money to be able to do the research.
Right. So what I did, so then the idea of, and I haven't had an idea this clear since World Tai Chi Day came into my mind.
Okay.
Global Transformation Project.
Yes.
What this is we don't deal with the whole healthcare system issue. What we do is we go to public education, because when you start looking at the science on the big five mind body practices that all have the big science behind them, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, they all bring the mind into the alpha state, the alpha brainwave state, and that's where the magic happens. And so you have that immune system boosting function. But the way that we get it in schools is we're pushing for a United Nations resolution to call for, to get the science out to public educators all over the planet, and recommend mind-body practices become a core part of public education.
Yes.
Because not, we have the immune system boosting things, which should fire people up. We should want the whole planet, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people if we can get this into public education. So you're talking about boosting the immunity. Now, what these kids can do is they can take things like COVID, they can catch them, they can process the virus, and then what happens is it becomes more contagious, but it becomes less deadly. And so then what happens is you eventually create a global immunity to it. But the kids are the ones that can handle these things. That's what the data shows with COVID. It's like the kids had very little risk of mortality with COVID. And if we get this into public schools, it could change the immunity of the whole planet, because these kids would change these viruses so that comorbidity, people that have comorbidities or elderly or whatever, then they would get a less virulent aspect of
I
it.
think I really get what you're saying here. When it's again this preventative healthcare, that when you give yourself what your system needs so that it's stronger on the inside, so that the immune system is doing what it's supposed to do. I mean, myself and my Wan Chi colleagues, we're running something called Optimizing Your Immune System right now. We're not using the word boost. It's not about boosting it. It doesn't need any of that inflammation. It just needs to be optimized by how you take care of yourself in your mind. And as we know, there's so much stress in the world, anxiety, fear and worry, and all of that lowers your resistance to anything.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that I think really helps is, because you're talking about the big five, which is the yoga and Tai Chi, Qigong, mindfulness and meditation. I'd like to put music in there. I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
I think,
Trust me, music. Well, here, John Lennon's right back here.
oh yeah, well, should we, yeah, do you want to say a little bit about music and about the track that you've chosen to play us here on Chi Time, Bill?
Well, the Beatles, on the very last pages of the new book, the new second edition of Gospel Science, I closed the book with mentioning the Beatles, because when the Beatles went to India to study meditation with the Maharishi, I was really young, but I remember it clearly, and I think that influenced, God knows how many hundreds of millions of kids just like me, because the Beatles were beloved all over the planet. I mean, they were a phenomenon unlike anything that ever happened before. And they always sing about love. And their songs just seem so hopeful. And I feel like we're kind of emerging from a winter, as a humanity. And so when you asked me to contemplate, what song would be the song, I was hovering between a couple of songs, but I ended up with "Here Comes the Sun," because I think that's where we're going, and that's what the Global Transformation Project is all about.
So you're back on Chi Time with me, Clara Apollo. And just before those station messages, we heard seminal track from the Beatles as chosen by my guest here on Chi Time, Bill Douglas. It was the Here Comes the Sun. Indeed, one of my favourites as well. And it just really brings that glowing light of possibility and hope in that it is. I think we've all got the potential to have that kindled in our system. And when we can raise our frequency, then that helps everybody around. I mean, it's kind of a win-win for everyone, isn't it, Bill?
Absolutely. Yes. It's like, the last couple of years, we've kind of gone through a time where, our vision of possibility for the future has gotten a little bit squeezed, and that's
Mm,
natural when you're going through, something like we all went through. But
mm,
now we're emerging from it. And
yes.
so I think that one of the things that can happen when we go through a catastrophe is that we're more open to possibility. And there's tremendous possibility. I've spent 40 years putting all this science together, and
Yeah.
I just finished putting it together. It just published on January the 1st, the new second edition of the Gospel of Science. And it became very clear that the Global Transformation Project was the purpose of putting all that science together. And it was just so hopeful. And Here Comes the Sun just so epitomizes the vibe of this book, but more importantly, the Global Transformation Project. And
Yeah.
so,
So if we could just backtrack a little bit about that and the Global Consciousness Project that Dr. Roger Nelson was involved in. I know that Dr. Roger Janker also spoke on Chi Time about this as well, because it was like brought to our attention that when a global event occurs and everybody has a very similar response, and I think it was at the death of Princess Diana where it
mhm.
just affected the whole world. And with these sort of these random generators that Dr. Nelson has, were they around then? Was he picking it
Yes,
up then? Can you
that
tell
was
us a
that.
little bit more about that?
Yes, I'm so glad Dr. Roger Yanko is talking about this. He's such a visionary. That's great. And it makes me think, when we first came up with the idea of World Tai Chi Day, I had that vision in my mind, and I thought that was like a personal vision. But now, as I've been collecting, this new data for this second book that just came out, we became aware of the Global Consciousness Project that you just referred to. And yes, they had those random event generators all over the planet. And Princess Diana's death was the first significant global event where they noticed the random event generators going off the charts. Just to give everybody a little primer, uh, if you go to globaltransformationproject.org, and you'll see some charts from the Global Consciousness Project, which was born out of Princeton Engineering and Anomalies Research Laboratory over 20 years ago. They actually created it in 1998, same year that we had the first World Tai Chi and Qigong Day event. And that was also the first year that Dr. Effie Chow founded the World Congress on Qigong. So you start to see how these things percolate. And I realized, looking back as I saw this science, that wasn't my vision. This World Tai Chi Day was not my vision, I don't believe, at this point with the science. And it's validating things that I had kind of felt in a way, but didn't know how to articulate. But no, I think what I was doing was I was tapping into a global desire,
Mm,
because the World Tai Chi Day spread so rapidly.
yeah.
And people all over the planet were just, there were certain visionaries in different countries or different cities that were just creating these massive events. It was like
Mm,
it was their idea. And I just happened to tap into something that was in the global vibe. And so what the Global Consciousness Project does, just to give everybody a little primer, is if you go to there and you see the charts, you'll see there's a zero line that goes right across the middle. And that is kind of where a random event generator's production hovers, because what it's like is it's like an electronic coin flipper. So if you flip coins, I think it's 200 times per second, which is what these random event generators do. It's going to diverge some, but it's going to stay on that zero line because that's the statistical probability. It's going to stay around that. It's going to be 50-50 ultimately if you look at it long enough. And that's what keeps the lights on in Las Vegas. They know that that's the case. But what happened during Princess Diana's death was it veered way off of the normal track. And then they realized something's going on here. And so then they started to look at, in 2007, I contacted the Global Consciousness Project because I just started to become aware of their work. And I said, we organize this World Tai Chi and Qigong Day every year where, people all over the planet are doing Tai Chi and Qigong together. And I said, if you guys could, could you guys look at your data that day and see if you see anything? This is 2007.
Mm.
Well, they never got back to me. And so I was really disappointed. I just thought, oh, well, we didn't have any impact. We weren't super big at that time. Maybe tens of thousands of people at that point around the planet participating. But then when I was working on the second edition of the book to come out in 2022, I contacted them because I just wanted to find out if any of these massive, because now after World Tai Chi Day, there's been other events that have spawned. And like the International Day of Yoga is the United Nations project, where they do the same thing we do with yoga all over the planet for a 24-hour period. And then there's other, international mass mind body events that are held. And so, they got back to me, the Princeton born Global Consciousness Project, they got back to me like very quickly. And they said, yeah, we've been observing like 100 of these. And right at the top was World Tai Chi and Qigong Day.
Wow. And they hadn't told you?
Yeah, no, they hadn't told me. And so that's how I found out. And I was able to get it in the book before it published.
How wonderful, Bill. That's amazing.
So exciting. And so it veered off 0.05, and 0.05 probability, that's considered statistically significant. So like if they were looking at a drug and its side effects, if there was a side effect that was 0.05, that would affect the rollout of that drug. That's how science works. And so World Tai Chi Day was 0.05. I believe the World Yoga Day was 0.05. And so they found this happening over and over again during these. And so what their ultimate realization was that when groups of people, and it can only, some of these events only involve thousands of people around the planet, but groups of people, when they come together in healing and compassion states of coherent consciousness, which is what Tai Chi and Qigong and the Big Five produce, that alpha state, that they have a bigger impact on the planetary consciousness than even events of horrific fear or tragedy. And so that's a very hopeful.
That is very interesting, because my guest on the last edition, the one before that, with Pam Gregory, the international astrologer, I was asking her about this. She talks about heart frequency and heart resonance, and how that, and when we are in a state of gratitude and grace and compassion, that raises our frequency, and the effect of a raised frequency is so much stronger than the lower frequencies. And it was like, so there's going to be loads of people who are still struggling with fears and worries and anxieties, but that energy isn't as actually strong. It doesn't impact as strongly. Well, it depends how many, but generally than the positive, I would call them higher vibes. I don't like to use that word higher, but the more aligned with your truth, with the resonance of your heart and your soul and your being, and kindness. Is that the thing about kindness, loving kindness? And I think it's only about a week ago that Thich Nhat Hanh passed as well, and there was a real definite wave of deep compassion that day, more so than it was like everyone I knew him, and it was all little memes coming in and out. I just felt, whoa, what an amazing legacy he's left, but also what an amazing thing we're experiencing together, sort of grieving this amazing, incredible soul. And so I think as a combination, as a global community now, we have more impact than maybe our little individual selves realize. And I think that's part of what you're doing here with the Global Transformation Project, isn't it? It's okay, take care of yourself, but actually it's going to be for everybody that we're behaving like this.
Yes. Yeah. One of the things that I get into in the book is the very issue of compassion and how that is woven into the fabric of the universe. And we can see that in many different ways. Very exciting science. One of the things that I get to at the very beginning of the book is what they did was they did a research project. And all the research that I'm talking about in the book, it's all cited, and my website has live links to the original video, the original data, the original study, or whatever. So I wanted to just put it right at everybody's fingertips, so you'd be able to quote this stuff and share it with people. And one of the things that they did, one of the research studies that they did, was they had people performing selfish hedonistic acts of pleasure, and then they had people performing altruistic acts of pleasure, where you're doing something for the greater good with no return. And what they found was that they both experienced like a similar high. They described their mental, high very similarly, but the DNA of the people knew the difference. And the DNA, when they were involved in selfish pleasures, the health expression of the DNA degraded, more inflammation. When they were involved in altruistic pleasures, so they're both getting the same mental high, but the DNA knew the difference. When they're involved in altruistic pleasures, there was a healing effect on the DNA. So this compassion is there at very core. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is Charles Darwin, because here in Kansas City, we have probably the best World War I museum in the world. It's spectacular. If you ever come to Kansas City, you have to see it. And it's very moving. And at the very beginning of the museum, they have Charles Darwin's book. And they talk about how that book contributed to the beginning of World War I, the idea of survival of the fittest. And I don't think Darwin actually said that, but that was the concept that he was kind of credited with. And it was a misinterpretation of Darwin, of his view, because his next book that came out, it didn't mention survival of the fittest or the concept, maybe a couple of times. But what the book was filled with was the idea of compassion and love. And what he was saying was that it was humanity's desire to connect and to support other human beings. That's what elevated humanity to their status, to our status on the planet. It was love, it was compassion. And so you see that in our DNA. That was Darwin's perception of it. And people don't talk about that, unfortunately. Some of the most beautiful things that famous people say we never hear about. We just hear the coined phrases and stuff like that. And so what I show in the book is that compassion is woven into every aspect of humanity, and in fact even into our economics. And I quote Utah and Florida. They started projects where they just gave homeless people homes to live in, safe, warm places with running water, bathrooms, where maybe they could cook. They just gave them that. If they saw them on the street, the policeman took them to the place, they processed them, gave them somewhere to live, warm out of the cold. And what they found was that in Florida and Utah, where they did this, it was a county in Florida, it was the state of Utah, I believe. It's all in the book, it's all sourced in the book. But what they found was that they saved between $12,000 and $21,000 per homeless person for just giving them a place to stay. So they didn't have to have the police rousting them to, go from one place to another all night long.
It's like it's joined up thinking, isn't it? And so Bill Douglas is here with us on Chi Time, and if you want to find out more about what he's talking about, his amazing second edition of his book, The Gospel of Science, then head over to the globaltransformationproject.org. And just as we come to wind up here on the radio edition of this interview, I would just like to follow on from what you were saying about compassion in the DNA by a quote from your book that you're saying that here's what we know scientifically. Medical science shows us that the state of mind of gratitude actually has physical healing effects on the heart and the body, and that our consciousness, it affects the water, which makes up 70 to 90% of us and our planet. So I would like to bring that up because as an elemental Qigong teacher myself, the water element is so fundamental, and we've been really presencing the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto. And I just wanted to share this crystal card of his here about wisdom and compassion, and just share this with us on the YouTube. So if you're listening to this, and just want you to imagine a beautiful water crystal here, just bringing the wisdom and compassion energy through for us all. And and to remember that as we are all made up of water, as indeed our planet is, that how we speak to ourselves and how we speak to ourselves is how we speak to ourselves. And this has a ramifications into our whole system. And anything you'd like to just say just to finish up with this phase of the discussion?
Dr. Emoto's foundation, they let me use one of their crystal photos in my book. But I also detail 3 other studies that followed Dr. Emoto's work, because Dr. Emoto suffered a lot of, I think, unfair attacks. I get into all this in the book. There's like this whole kind of mechanistic view of the world, and a lot of media adopts it, and it's just not scientifically accurate. So there were other major studies, international studies, that followed up Dr. Emoto, and they found that consciousness impacted the crystallization of water, and it wasn't local. People on the other side of the planet could have an effect on it. And so the concept of the book is to get mind-body practices in public education, because the science shows it makes smarter students. It actually increases our IQ. It improves test scores, makes healthier students, and it reduces bullying in schools because it increases the empathy and compassion parts of the brain physically, and it reduces the stress fear parts of the brain physically. And so there's just just endless reasons why this should be part of public education, because it makes smarter students. And once we get it into, UN resolution, get it out through the public education around the world, we're talking about hundreds of millions of new meditators. And we know that a mind going into a coherent state of consciousness has a healing effect on the whole planet. I have tons of research in the book that, validate everything that I'm saying here. And so we're talking about global transformation.
Yes.
In a very real way. And we could all be a part of this. When I started World Tai Chi Day, it was like, oh, it was this Bill Douglas's idea. But what it became over time was what it really was. And it was people all over the planet's idea. And that's where I want to go with this. I want to go where I'm not the one who's always talking about it. Everybody else is. and this is doable. We can do this. This is really within our grasp.
Honestly, Bill, I'm having all the shivers here in such a beautiful way. When you said those words, it's like you're speaking a total truth. This is what it's really about. The Global Transformation Project. This is our opportunity at this time, 2022. Here we grow. We can do this. And with the work that you're bringing through to back up what we can experience, we can help other people understand why it's interesting for them to look at this as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just for me, we were talking about the fears and the stresses that we've all been going through the last few years. And for me, just like everybody, it was very stressful. There were times when everything felt very dismal, and, and I still experience that from time to time. So it's not like I'm above all those things, but, immersing myself in this science, it kept bringing me back to the source, which is going into that alpha state, however we get there: yoga, meditation, mindfulness, Qigong, Tai Chi, all these things that can get you into that flow state. That's our source. That's where our stress and fear part of the brain starts to shrink when we go into those coherent states, and the empathy and compassion parts of the brain start to expand. So we're talking about literally creating a kinder, more compassionate and more abundant planet, because we're talking about saving billions, trillions of dollars every year planet-wide on saved future medical costs, and also on saved social costs, police, prisons, courts, all these kind of things. We're talking about global transformation.
Well, so if you're listening to this and want to get involved, where can people go to, Bill?
Yes, go to globaltransformation.org, and please, just adopt this as your own project. It's not mine. This is a global project, and spread that information and spread that link anywhere and everywhere, and also sign up for the newsletter there so that you can stay updated because in time we may do like a very polite lobbying of different nations, UN missions, to try to find different countries that will introduce the Global Transformation Project. And we can do this. I mean, World Tai Chi Day, we got government people all over the planet involved in a big way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this on Chi Time. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you too.
Thank you kindly. And if you've enjoyed this episode of Chi Time, you can listen to it on demand here on UK Health Radio, or you can hop over to the video version on my YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, make a comment, let us know, keep the conversations going here. As Bill's saying, it's not just what he's doing or what I'm doing, it's what we're all doing. And we're all part of the jigsaw puzzle of us creating what we want on planet Earth next. So it's over to you, my beautiful Chi friends. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Keep your Chi up. Your energy is important.